So I would like to conclude this session with two kinds of remarks. First of all, I would like to make some remarks on project management when you're dealing with Quarto documents. In general, you can do everything as you have learned in our particular session on project management. You just need to keep some things in mind. First of all, is that the use of the here package is, it's a good idea to do that anyways, but it's particularly important when writing Quarto documents. If you don't know what the here package is, you should definitely check it out. We have this session on project management where I explain it. There are tons of documentation in the internet. So I really recommend you to use our projects and the here package in particular. So why is it important? Because when you render a QMD document, your computer is not using your current working directory. The computer is treating your document as if your working directory is the location of the particular Quarto document. And this might lead to mistakes whenever you are using relative paths in your code. And that means that you cannot copy-paste code from an R script that contains relative paths and that works, except either you have all files within one particular directory, which you shouldn't, because that's often chaos, or you've used the here package. So in case you're using the here package, you can ignore all my comments here, because you can write your code exactly as before. But if you don't use the here package for some reason when writing normal R scripts, you should definitely consider using it when writing Quarto, because it avoids all these mistakes that come from wrong relative path specifications, and it allows you to copy paste code from R scripts directly into Quarto. Also, it is usually a good idea to put all the QMD files either into the folder R or to create a separate top-level directory Quarto. I usually recommend you to have a separate top-level directory called Quarto, because especially when you're creating HTML documents, there are a lot of helper files created, and they might make your folder look a little bit chaotic. And if you then have separate R scripts, that might be confusing. So I usually recommend you to have a directory R for R scripts, and then a separate top-level directory called Quarto for your Quarto documents. Then the second remark I would like to do is about avoiding common mistakes when writing a Quarto document. And this is really about some very fundamental things. There are some very common mistakes, like having very long tables showing up in your document. And these screw up your document considerably. They make it very, very ugly, very painful to read, but they are actually very, very easy to avoid. So I really suggest you're investing 2 or 3 minutes to see what these mistakes are and how to avoid them. So what I recommend you is always, you're writing a Quarto document, you create the final Markdown document, you render it, and then you have a close look at it, and just use a little bit of basic instincts of how a document you personally would like to read should look like, and try to get your document a little bit closer to that. So check whether any of the problems that I'll mention in a second below still exist, and eliminate them if they do. So my recommendation is I created this file disastermarkdown.pdf. They can download this file, look at it, and maybe have it here right below the video, and then think about what you would like to change in that file. Think about that for a couple of seconds, and then continue with the video where we actually go through the main mistakes done with that document and how to solve them. So here, the problems, the solutions. First of all, you see in this document, there are some very, very long and very, very wide tables. And they are just a pain to read. It doesn't make any sense to present data in this way. It makes sense to show people the structure of the tables there. But you don't need the full tables to achieve that, because that's wasting a lot of space in that document. So when you want to print output from data tables, only print what is really necessary to show. If it's just about showing the structure, maybe use the function str or dplyr glimpse. If you just want to show the first rows, use head, or so on and so forth. But avoid these big tables that actually nobody can digest when reading it. Then the document contains some uninformative warnings or messages. Think that your document might be read by somebody who doesn't even know R from the first place. So warnings or messages are usually not very useful to have in a final rendered document. You can avoid this by using the chunk options warnings and message. And my recommendation would be to set them to false by default and to really only set them to true when you actually want to show a warning. For example, you're writing an explanatory text where you tell people of how to avoid a certain warning, then it might make sense to show them the warning in the first place. But by default, it's often a good idea to set the chunk options warning and message to false by default. Then at some instances in the document, there's code being shown that's not referenced in the main text at all. In the main text, it's only relevant to actually show the final result of the code, like for example, a figure. In other cases where you're actually discussing code, the code is not shown at all. So whenever you create a document, go through it and make sure that the chunk options echo, which concern the code, whether it's shown or not, and include whether they are used correctly. And that people can see the code only then if the code is actually important and is referenced in the main text, and that they can see the output of the code whenever this output is actually referred to, and only include in the final document what is really necessary for the reader, and don't show them superfluous R codes, for example. Correspondingly, in some instances, the code might be shown, but the output is missing. Here, you should be very clear to use the include chunk option correctly. And finally, figures in this document are in inappropriate sizes. If you want to change the size of a figure, you can use the out width or the fig width chunk options. Of course, you need to experiment a little bit with them. And sometimes it's easier to save your figure as a PDF and then include this figure into your Quarto document. But in any case, you should make sure that figures are shown in appropriate sizes in the final document, because otherwise this is very disturbing for the audience that's about to read your file. And so that's really a shame, because it's easy to avoid. And that actually concerns all these mistakes. Every single mistake can make your document very hard to read and ugly, meaning that it's not given the attention that it might deserve. And all of them are very easy to solve. So I really recommend you render the document, have a look, invest 2 or 3 minutes to actually solve these mistakes. If you want to make it even nicer, for example, make the tables particularly pretty, there are also additional packages to achieve that. Like for example, the cable package or cable extra allows you to make really, really pretty tables. Again, there's a great overview in the Quarto documents, and I recommend you to have a look at that.